Ya Alimadat, I hope you are all keeping well and safe. My name is Nadima Korbani and I will be your host for this evening. Before I share the program for tonight, here are some highlights of the board activities this week. Tomorrow we begin with a cancer support group session at 10:30 a.m. No matter at what point of life you are at, it requires courage and resilience to experience the journey of cancer and battle through it. The Arakan Health Board invites you to an interactive conversation with strong individuals who have been through this journey and learn from their newfound perspectives on life and self-care. We have the honor of two special guests sharing their stories of how one started her battle at the age of 22 and one much later in her life. It will be an inspirational session where we will seek each other's support and heal together. Join us tomorrow, Sunday, 9th May at 10:30 a.m. BST. For details on how to join, see Al-Saha or social media. In the afternoon tomorrow, join the Golden Club at 12:30 p.m., consisting of faith and well-being talks and an opportunity for members of the Jamaat to socialize and support lifelong learning. Details on how to join can be found on yesterday's Al-Saha. Do you have questions about your faith but not sure who to ask or how? Join us for Ask in Alwais, a youth-focused question and answer session tomorrow, Sunday, 9th May from 7 to 8 p.m. exclusively for 17 to 35-year-olds. This session will be led by Alwais Hussein Charania, member for youth and young adults on eTrip Canada and lead of the Ambassador Program on the Council for Canada. Feel free to ask your questions when signing up via the Ismaili app or just attend on the day with your questions or a listening ear. On Tuesday, join Parvis once again for a session on chair and standing exercises with Parvis at 11 a.m. Stories on the Rooftop are very pleased to present their next session with Munira Wilson, MP for Twickenham. The session titled Giving a Voice to the Voiceless, the driver behind Munira's journey from Golders Green to the Green Benches, will be on a Wednesday, 12th May at 8 p.m. There will also be a question and answer session. Register via the Ismaili app. During this pandemic, many of us have struggled with our mental health, or perhaps our family members or friends have felt anxious or low in mood. The Mental Health Foundation has chosen the theme Nature. It's evident that access to nature has never been more crucial for all of us after having experienced an extensive lockdown. Those morning walks, that breath of fresh air, can help to refresh our minds and help us to appreciate what we have around us. Use this opportunity to talk about the importance of mental health and how nature has helped you cope. For more information, please visit www.mind.org.uk. And now on to tonight's program, which is by the Arakan music program called Revitalizing Our Cultural Heritage. Last week, we shared part 1 of this incredible program, and so this week we are showcasing part 2. Continue to journey through Muslim societies to explore the role of music in creating our cultural identity. Fairuz Nishanova, director of the Agacan music program, discusses the work and ethos of the program, showcasing the ways in which our musical heritages continue to define us. I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. Continue to stay safe and well. Ya Alimadat.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good afternoon to all our folks who are joining us from the UK jurisdiction, and welcome on board to all the international participants. Thank you so much for joining to this Heritage webinar series. On behalf of the ITRAB UK Heritage webinar team, I just want to welcome all of you to this afternoon session today. And I would be moderating the session today for all of you. So let's start by talking about the Heritage series. This is the 7th webinar that we are doing today. And the aim of this webinar series was to look how the interrelationship of faith and heritage is expressed in arts, especially in performing arts and literature in that way. And in this light, we have done the entire series throughout. Today's topic is the Aga Khan Music Program, Revitalizing Our Cultural Heritage. This is part 2 of the session, and I can see many of the names that you had already been there in the part 1 of this topic as well. So welcome on board and thank you for joining us again for that. In the first part, the speaker helped us to raise or to think about many intriguing questions, like what is the living musical heritage, right? How do we think about that? Is it something that is created contemporary, but how does then it is rooted in the tradition as well? And where do you find that kind of equilibrium in that sense? What does this idea of revitalization mean? How do we reframe this idea of evolving tradition? And I think some very exciting ideas came about this piece around that in many Eastern cultures, how music becomes a way of transmitting the whole values, ethical and normativity piece to the next generation as well. And it's not just for pleasure purposes. And I think this got into some exciting discussions as well. We hope to continue some of these discussions today with our speaker, Ferouz. I would briefly introduce her for those who weren't there last week. Ferouz Nishinova is a cultural development specialist with lifelong love for art, music, and dance. And those who were there in the call last in part 1, you would realize the passion, the spirit, the enthusiasm with which she spoke about music was commendable and inspiring for many of us on this journey as well. She joined the AKDN in 2000, and since then the director of Aga Khan Music Initiative at the Geneva-based Trust for Culture. She has overseen the creation of music awards, organization of the inaugural ceremony, and many other events associated to that. She serves as the executive producer of the Aga Khan Music Initiative concerts, recordings, films, and public performances and events as well. She's part of the international jury for the European Festivals Association. And this afternoon, it's our pleasure to welcome Ferouz for this webinar series, which is part of the Heritage webinars for this part 2. So on this note, Ferouz, over to you. And then once your talk is finished, we would go on and do a facilitated question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good to be back with you. Thank you, everybody who is devoting half of your part of your afternoon and evening to listening to this. I'm delighted. I'm very happy. I'm obviously extremely happy with what I do, and so whenever I get to share this and speak about just how much beauty and love and precious healing and strengthening powers are locked in the traditional and contemporary music that is rooted in tradition. I'm always very happy to do that and to share this as widely as I possibly can. So thank you for spending your time with us today. I think what I'd like to start with, and I realized that I probably didn't talk about it last time because I was very conscious about how much time we had, but one thing a lot of people ask me about when we speak about the creation of the music program in the AKDN, and when they look at my background, one of the things that not a lot of people realize is that I'm not a professional musician. I'm not an ethnomusicologist. I didn't go to a music school. I didn't train as a stage artist. I'm a diplomat. I'm a diplomat and a global economist. I come from a long line of professional career diplomats. And what I was prepared for all my life was to serve a very particular purpose, and that was international diplomacy. What happened though when I graduated was the fact that I realized was the changing of the world, was the changing of the world system, and was the changing, ever-changing geography of my own base, is that there wasn't one specific country that I wanted to serve. And one unbroken rule of diplomacy is that the devotion to the country that you serve has to be unwavering. And that's the part that turned me away specifically from diplomacy. And I then decided to give international parliament and international diplomacy a shot. So that's how I ended up joining the United Nations, only to realize very quickly that it's one of those instances when the idea and the impetus behind the creation of the mechanism didn't necessarily match the reality. And one rule that I made for myself when choosing a career or a profession that I wanted to devote myself to was that I wanted to be able to see the results of my own work. I wanted to see the kind of benefits that are given to the host community that are on the receiving end of one action or another, or a set of action or another. And that's how my quest to find an organization that does just that began. And I was very happy to come to AKDN, I knew about the organization, but I never, I think, imagined working for it. So I was very happy to be poached into it 20 years ago. And that was not for music also. I was poached for a very specific reason, and that was the creation of the University of Central Asia. So for the first 5 years of my existence in the network, it was the creation of the UCA, the negotiation of its establishment agreement, and negotiations with all the 3 host countries of the UCA that remained my main job and my main assignment. And pretty much in the first months of that, His Highness dropped this new wrapped package in the form of music initiative at that point on my lap. And if someone had told me that 20 years later, this wonderful tiny project would grow into what it is today and would absolutely rule my professional life, I probably would have thought that this was a joke. So this is another example that if you look in the span of professional careers and differences that those careers can make, 20 years is nothing. 20 years is a click in history. So the fact that in the space of 20 years, we not only created a new program, we not only created 5 different well-functioning aspects of this program, we not only integrated that into all the other development activities of AKDN to strengthen it, to help it flourish, to help it actually be effective, not only in a one narrow stream of effectiveness, but as a conglomerate, as something that is rounded and part of a much bigger set of actions. That just shows you how extraordinary AKDN can be in not only defining a beneficiary, but also delivering to that beneficiary a balanced set of action, implementation of which we cannot control. We can deliver it, we can explain how it is to be best used, we can provide toolkits that will facilitate that implementation and use, but we are not a national government. We are not a mechanism that stands on top of the beneficiary and supervises every step of the implementation. And I think that is the kind of beauty that this mechanism of integrated approach to development actually brings. So with that, and this probably to also answer a question about my professional training. So I'm not a professional musician. I studied music. I play musical instruments. I studied dance as well. In my ancestors in Central Asia, we always had a very long tradition of the local rulers serving as patrons of the music and arts and craft. So those ancestors of mine are having a good laugh right now when they see what I'm doing. But this is not certainly not what I set out to achieve. So that's another argument in favor of unpredictability and wonderfulness of AKGN, that it brings out traits in people that we sometimes ourselves do not necessarily know that we have. Now, with that, let's position a Aga Khan music program in the organigram of AKGN, because I realized that I didn't do it last time. I was so excited about talking about what is it that we do that I didn't show you where we are in the grand scheme of things in AKGN. So you're very familiar with this, right? Everybody knows the organigram of the Imamat and the AKGN. What we talked about last time, if you remember, is that we talked about the economic development part being the most interesting and the most desirable by most of our beneficiaries, because this is something that brings in long-term investment and ultimately financial viability and income generation. And then we talked about social development part, sort of complementing what economic development does. And then we also talked about how easy it is for many of our beneficiary governments to view cultural development is either an unnecessary part or a part that, as I told you last time, as the part that's viewed as this permanent burden on somebody else's budget. And what His Highness is doing through our cultural development action is constantly proving that when it's properly looked after and when it's properly invested into, culture obviously stops being a losing part of the budget, but becomes a trampoline from which all the other initiatives can grow. So you see that the main agency in the cultural development part, the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, serves as an umbrella organization that administers all the activities in the in this domain of development. Now, Aga Khan Music Program is a relatively new addition. For a very long time, the Aga Khan Trust for Culture consisted of Aga Khan Award for Architecture, Historic Cities Program, and the Education Program that also includes the initiatives that we have at Harvard, MIT, and ACPIA initiatives. And the two relatively recent additions are the Aga Khan Music Program and the Aga Khan Museum, which were both conceived at the same time. It was in the year 2000 that both of those were conceived and created, at least on paper, in the concept form. But it's taken a little longer for the museum to become a physical building. And that is something to be talked about. Remember last time we talked, I was very happy to announce to you the big scoop, the announcement of the merger between the Aga Khan Music Initiative and the Aga Khan Music Awards. And just to remind you, and also those who are joining us for the first time this afternoon, what does the current Aga Khan Music Program consist of? Well, it consists of 5 different elements. It's the Aga Khan Music Awards, education and mentoring that we talked about in great detail last time, creation and performance activities, which also include commissioning new music. Then we have production, documentation, and dissemination domain, and finally, online projects and our digital archives. We also talked about the fact that very few of the programs in AKGN, in fact, only 2, have their own visual identity. And I expressed my immense gratitude to His Highness for his understanding that this kind of program really does require its own distinct visual identity, its own logo. And we looked into what went into creating this logo of the Aga Khan Music Program, and how does one express the experience of listening to music or viewing a musical performance when it comes from a tradition that is distinctly Eastern, distinctly from the part of the world where Muslims had a very significant influence on the creation of on the artistic and musical creations. But at the same time, there are no musical instruments that can be used as a common one for the whole of the Eastern world, nor is this music written down in musical scores, which is something that we who live in the Western world are very much used to. So this is not something that ever happens in the East. And then you'll remember, those who were with us last webinar, we finally agreed, with great help from His Highness, that we would follow the example of the Arakan Award for Architecture, and we would use words rendered in Kufic script to define 6 main concepts that accompany the viewing, listening, and creating music experience in the East. And those concepts are East or Orient, Sharq, Sama, which is listening, Talim, which is teaching, Wahi, that stands for inspiration, Zaman, as you well know, time, and finally Nafas, which is breath or soul, which is considered an integral part of experience of an artistic exposure in the East. We looked very briefly at time, and I took you through the main points or historical moments in the creation and existence of the Arakan music program, and that was, of course, the actual creation and partnership with the Smithsonian, which kickstart all of our existence, the opening of the arts and music education centers and schools, the creation of the DVD anthology and the expansion beyond Central Asia, the creation of the textbook and the website, first ever university level materials about this kind of music, the creation of the music awards, and then finally in 2020, the creation of the Arakan music program. We then talked about teaching. I'm not going to repeat everything that I said. I walked you through the creation of our centers throughout Central Asia. And we looked at the depth into which the teaching of traditional music, the creation of the music curricula has fallen, and what we had to do as an organization to ensure not only the return of the traditional method of teaching, not only the contemporization of that method, but also the return of respect and value of the profession throughout the region. And I've also given you examples of some of the brightest, wonderful young souls that are permanent dwellers in all of our schools and centers. Now, one thing that we discovered when we started creating these music centers is that while the tradition of the distinct traditions of post-Soviet Central Asia and Afghanistan were very well known in the world of Western academia. There were plenty of those, all of you who would wander into, if you're in the UK, if you'd wander into the King's College or maybe the SOAS building, or those of you in the US, those who would go into Harvard or any of the Ivy League colleges, there would always be a very large music department that would boast a terrific department of ethnomusicology. And they would have at least one, if not more, professors who would devote their life to studying music of Central Asia. But there would never be a single university level education resource that could be used to understand the full diversity, the richness, and the full depth of this kind of music. So it has fallen onto us to create a first ever university level textbook, which is entitled Music of Central Asia. And it's those of you who are in London, feel free to go into the IIS library and browse through this whenever you have time. It's a 700-page textbook, but that's only a small portion of the material that is available, because the largest part of it, and that's the part that is interactive and ever-changing, is the companion website that accompanies this textbook, without which the actual teaching cannot be done. And what I'm very happy about once we've created this resource is that not only is it taught in the West, because at this point it's taught at SOAS and it's taught at Harvard and Dartmouth and Stanford and Brown and Columbia, but it's also now taught at the University of Central Asia. And we're now adapting this university level textbook to the teaching at all of the Agricult academies. So it's not only a wonderful resource, it's also a resource that is marked by its flexibility and its adaptability to the student audience, no matter where that student audience is. Now we come to listening. Now, listening to music is, remember we talked last time how this lockdown and COVID existence and COVID life, how it is changing our attitude towards everything, towards being social, towards being family, towards understanding our own potential and limitations, but also most definitely to the simple act of going into a theater or somebody's house or a jam session and just listening to any act of live performance. I, for one, am beginning to miss it immensely. And I certainly have had enough of Zoom concerts. And I very much hope that sometime, hopefully at this time next year, we will be back to expressing ourselves artistically through a live interaction with the audience. But back in 2003, when we were just beginning to open our schools and music centers, and we were realizing several things at the same time. One of those things was, as I told you, that the profession of the musician was not something that commanded either respect or prospect of financial viability and independence. But secondly, if you were in the West and you were brave enough to be interested in the music that came from the part of the East that was sort of most obscure, the chances are you wouldn't be able to find any kind of quality product that would allow you to view or listen to or play a recording of the music that came from post-Soviet Central Asia and Afghanistan. And so with the blessings from the Arakan Trust for Culture Board, we partnered with one of the most respected labels in the music world, and that is the label of Folkways, part of the Smithsonian Institution, part of the National Museum of the United States. They have one of the richest CD, DVD, and now online collections in the world. And what was most important for us about that is that not only is it a wonderful label, not only did they have the courage to go into something completely unknown and to work with the styles of music that were not known to the outside world, but they also, because they are a National Museum of the United States, because they are sort of part of the US governmental system, whatever it is that they produce in terms of CDs, or records or online resources, they become immediately part of the National Museum system of the US. And they are also available immediately through online and physical libraries that go to all the universities, all the higher education institutions. And that was the kind of access to the critical mass of both students and their teachers that we simply could not miss. And back in 2003, we did something revolutionary. Now we can laugh about that. But back in 2003, suggesting a creation of an anthology that was both CD and DVD was unthought of. It was an unknown product, and our co-producers at the Smithsonian had expressed very serious doubts about whether this product will actually be used. Now, I'm delighted to report that their concerns were unfounded. And those of you who saw our CD DVD collection will remember that it was made into almost a teacher training guide, in the sense that any teacher of musical art, if they wanted to talk about this kind of musical example, well, in the little set, in the little CD DVD set, covers of which you're seeing now in front of you, there was a CD itself, of course, which presented live music recorded at the very highest standard affordable. And this is another thing that was never afforded to the music of Central Asia. It was always, you always had to listen to very bad quality records that would be bought somewhere on the underground market. And this was certainly different. But then it was accompanied also by a DVD that had in it in-depth documentary featuring not only the artist, but also their lifestyles, the settings that allowed for their creation of this music. It also featured an interactive map of the region from which this music came from, which was fully clickable. Again, back in 2003, that was a great novelty. It also had an interactive musical glossary. So you could not only look at the instrument that was being performed, you could turn it, you could try it, you could, by by clicking on it, you could test the sound of it. And you could also read about it. There was a proper instrument glossary that accompanied the anthology. And what I want you to do after we finish this discussion is that those who were present at the last webinar, remember I asked you a question because we are now facing a new reality where we've not produced recorded music for quite a few years. We're producing a lot of live concerts, we're producing a lot of commissioned music, we're commissioning a lot of music for specific events that are of importance to His Highness and AKGN and the institutions of AKGN. We're producing a lot of music for the international events, but we have not put out a record in quite a long time since we finalized the creation of this anthology. And we are about to go back into recording studio whenever the COVID world allows us to do that. And remember, I asked you a question. How do you listen to your music today? So let's make sure that at the end of this discussion, when we open the questions and answer session, I will claim the privilege of the presenter and ask you the first question. And those of you who have the answers ready, please have them ready. Those of you who don't, then think about it while I'm talking. How do you listen to music today? The CDs and DVDs are we no longer have devices that would allow us to play them. We can't go into live concert hall or theater at the moment. There's very little live music happening except in the beauty of our own houses if we're lucky enough to have a musician in the family. We watch a lot of Zooms, we watch a lot of YouTubes. So at the end of this discussion or at the beginning of the Q&A, please remember to answer my question as to how do you listen to music today? Now, our next tab is the inspiration. And the inspiration came from our expansion in 2008 beyond the region of our original commitment, and that was the region of post-Soviet Central Asia and Afghanistan. You know, there is a saying that the tradition cannot be a museum object, that when the tradition becomes a museum object, that also signifies the first official day of its death and its demise. For each new generation of artists and audiences, for the tradition to remain alive, they have to not only be able to take it, they also have to be able to take it apart and break all the rules, bearing in mind, of course, that you can only break the rules if you have first mastered them, if you have first learned them. So at some point after the initial success of our schools and centers in Central Asia and the international tours that helped popularize this music and bring it both recognition abroad and also the respect at home, at some point the whole team of experts that was working on the creation of the program realized that we can only help the tradition in a very limited way if we continuously preserved it. Preservation only goes that far. But to really help it grow, to really help the tradition come alive again, we had to really develop it. And to do that, we had to expand beyond the geographic limits that we set for ourselves, that AKGN set to us when we made the original commitments to the region of post-Soviet Central Asia and Afghanistan. But at some point, those traditions could no longer be just developed in their own vacuum. And you know, when we talk about fusion, artistic fusion or musical fusion today, we almost automatically assume that anything that's fusion is also East-West. And this is a relatively new concept because musical fusion is nothing new. When we do live concerts with the representation of the Arakan master musicians, for example, our master musician from China will demonstrate how her instrument, a royal court pipa from Han Chinese regions of China, had originally actually come from barbarian Central Asia, and a two-string dutar became a classical musical instrument of the Chinese court. So music fusion is nothing new, yet what we had to revive was the East-East fusion rather than East-West fusion. And we started doing this kind of work back in 2008. And those who believe that if you take a group of very good musicians who are like-minded, who are sort of from the neighboring geographic regions, and once put in the same room together, they would just sort of immediately jump into this very high quality jamming session and music production. That is a very poetic image, but it's unfortunately not true. I remember very well making a first attempt at creating musical fusion that is East-East rather than East-West. And that happened in Al-Azhar Park in Cairo, and then it continued in Alexandria, also in Egypt, where we gathered together 15 of the brightest and most brilliant composer, performer, improvisers from Middle East, North Africa, Caucasus, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia. And that international language of music that we always talk about, which is of course a complete cliche, it really wasn't kicking in. And it took us about 3 years to understand that it's not enough to just be a very good composer, creator, and improviser, to begin speaking the musical language of your historic neighbors. It took a very specific artist to be able to do this kind of work. It took artists who knew their own tradition well enough to be able to use it as a trampoline for new creations. They had to know their own traditions well enough to be able to leave it behind the closed doors and go and understand and respect traditions of the others. And finally, those are the artists who had to leave their egos and their artistic know-how pretty much behind the closed doors when they entered the studio, and enter the studio completely open-minded to be able to create pieces that are rooted in tradition, but not in any way limited by that tradition. So it's a very exciting path, the path of musical commission and creation. And I'm very happy that this is the path that seems to be developing very well at the moment. We now come to breath, soul, something that is considered the most unique and integral element of musical creation and experience in the East. And this is where we come to the latest element added to the Agricult music program. And that, of course, is the Agricult Music Awards. Now, I've had to answer many times the same question: why the awards? How long was this in the making? Was this the actual idea from the very beginning? If you listen to His Highness, he will say that in the back of his own mind, back in late 70s, when he created the Arakan Award for Architecture for the first time, he always wanted for that to be followed by the Music Awards. And my very first meeting with Prince Amin, which was in October of 2000, I remember very well when we were discussing this concept for the creation of the music initiative. And he said, yes, and also to celebrate the excellence in the diversity in that part of the East, we should create the Arakan Music Prize. So the idea is well and truly his, and it's taken a very long time for us to be finally able to implement that. Now, why did it take such a long time? Well, remember we talked last time about how important it is to stick with the idea if you want to be able to develop the project to the point where, as a funder, as a developer, you can actually depart. It takes a lot of dedication, both time-wise and financial dedication, for the project to actually become solid and self-sustaining, and thus allowing the international creators such as AKTN to finally depart and alleviate the burden on the Imamate funding. So the reason these projects are successful is that we stick with them, not only for a long period of time, but also in very limited geographic areas. So while we were doing that, while our school and centers were becoming stronger and stronger, while our commissioning program was becoming stronger, we were also constantly becoming aware of just how much talent there is throughout the world of the Great East, and just how much more need there is for the kind of support that we were able to provide, but we were unable to give because of this time and geography limitation of our work. So this kind of idea was to celebrate the artistic excellence and exceptionality throughout the world of the Great East without necessarily making a 25-year-old commitment to the development of the project. And at the very beginning, the idea was not at all to create the music awards, despite Prince Amin's predictions. What we set out to create was a festival that would be not annual, that would be itinerant, that would allow us not only to celebrate the artistic excellence in the regions that we wanted to celebrate, but also to be able to showcase all of the extraordinary venues and cities and centers that AKDN has either built or invested into rehabilitation over the last 40 years. So the idea was always to have this itinerant musical event that celebrates excellence in different domains of artistic creation. And it became clear in the second year of work of the expert group that was put together for the creation of this event that this format was not going to be ever a successful festival. However, it lent itself most beautifully to the format of the awards. And because we have this extraordinary shining example of the Arakan Award for Architecture, it was a format that was easy to follow. And we took as much as we could from that successful format in terms of the creation of the steering committee, in terms of the creation of the master jury that are completely independent from any agency or any personality within the AKDN. And of course, that being music, which is architecture coming alive, as they often say, we also had to add elements that AKA does not currently have. And here you have the first cohort of the winners that were celebrated in Lisbon last year through the Arakan Music Awards. And what I need to tell you is that not only do we have no influence on the jury, except of course selecting them, but we also do not predetermine the domains or the categories in which the music prizes will be given, because that depends entirely. Those of you who watched the film about the creation of the music awards before this discussion began, those of you will know that we do not fix the domains in stone, and it's only the nominators and the quality and the amount of the nominations that ultimately determine the domains in which the awards will be given. And as I told you last time, I have done everything in my personal power to ensure that there will not be a Zoom or electronic edition of the next Arakan Music Awards. So I'm waiting for the COVID world to recede and to allow for the live event to happen again. Now, what you see on your screens is what I began my speech with last time, is the story of how Arakan Music Initiative and the Arakan Music Awards have jointly become Arakan Music Program. So while I use this as a promotion of our social media handles that I hope you will all watch and follow, I wanted to conclude this part of my talk by offering you a few thoughts on what I have personally learned in the last 20 years of implementing this program. Now, these are not official conclusions. These are not the examples that will go into a textbook about the cultural development work. But this is something I learned from listening to the conclusions that His Highness made when he, I think about 5 years ago, was asked to summarize the efficacy and efficiency and creativity and value of the cultural development work. And this is taking his thoughts and adapting them to the Arakan Music Program and trying to understand what are the rules for instrumentalizing artistic discovery, what are the rules for contemporizing traditional music, and what are the rules for creating a successful music development program. So to me, the rule number one is recognizing that we cannot do it alone, that partnerships are essential and have to be maintained and strengthened throughout the life of a project, including the post-completion period. Rule number two is that planning must go beyond the cultural goals. It should never be assumed that favorable social and economic impact will simply flow as a byproduct of a cultural commitment. Rule number 3, the engagement of local community. And this you will hear throughout any institution that you work with AKDN. The engagement of the local community, both beneficiaries and beyond, from the earliest stages of the project is absolutely essential. You cannot go back into the community 10 years after you started creating a project and explain that this was actually done for them. This is not going to work unless they were part from the very beginning, from the very first idea, the first impetus. Then this is not going to be something that they own, thus allowing the creator to depart. Rule number 4, besides upfront investment, long-term financial planning is essential, just as art, and should include development mechanism for all eventual income streams that will sustain the activity in the long run. Rule number 5, cultivate understanding that art, music, and artistic creations matter not only for its immediate effect and affecting presence. The audiences need to be trained, and effective examples of its long-term benefits have to be constantly provided. Rule number 6 to me is not to listen to skeptics. About 18 years ago, a very powerful minister of foreign and cultural affairs in the Central Asian country that will remain unnamed and unknown, at least in today's discussion, openly berated me for taking the cultural scene of his country back to its dark ages and working with instruments that will never be restored, and trying to train the musicians in the art of music that will never be valued by younger generation. Well, he has long been fired, and I'm still here, exercising what I love the most. And when I look at the local iterations of Afghan, Uzbek, Tajik, Kyrgyz, any other idol programs, whatever they are called, the Star Academy or the Voice or the Idols, the amount of our graduates that we see jamming on the open stage to the loving, adoring audience proves one more time that what we do is not only relevant today, but will be relevant 10 years and hopefully 50 years from now, only if the toolkits that we have created become updated and become constantly available through the institutions that permanentize them and continue implementing them. I think I'll stop here and open all of this to questions, because I've given you a lot of information. So let's see if it's digestible, if it's understandable, and if you have doubts, if you have criticisms, if you have questions, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Feroz. Thank you so much. If you have any questions or thoughts, just put it in the chat box and we will be able to pick that up. Feroz, do you want to start with the question that you posed earlier on?
Yes, absolutely. Everyone how many people do we have? We have 51 people. Goodness gracious. We have someone from Calgary. I'm just seeing the chat room. So we have people from the UK, people from Canada, maybe someone from the US. Tell me, how do you listen to music when you are stuck in your home? Hopefully you have a family member who is a terrific musician and can deliver some live music to you, but that doesn't happen very often. So today, when you're in your car, do you stream? Do you still have a CD player? Do you have LP discs that are now coming back into vogue with gigantic force? Let me know, what is your mode of delivery of sound into your home? How do you listen to your music?
So there are a few responses coming up already in the chat. I think the first that we have is listening to car radio, YouTube, listening to choir conductors. Then there is Spotify and Sonos as an example. Somebody said streaming, quite a lot of streamings and YouTubes. And then audiophile while driving, Spotify and YouTube, car radio, CD player. And then there is, I have taken up drumming. Again, Spotify, SoundCloud.
The person who said that they've taken up drumming,
Yeah.
First of all, well done, because the rhythm is essential in understanding any kind of music that comes from the East. The rhythm is essential. But one thing I'll tell you, and this is something that we do with our students at the jam sessions, we tell them not to bring a drum with them. Professional percussion players, we tell them not to bring drums with them and to use whatever they have next to them as a percussion instrument. So try doing that as well. You can drum on your on the wheel of your car when you're driving. Anything can become a percussion instrument. Your knees can become a percussion instrument. Your spouse, anyway, anything close to you. So well done for taking up drumming, and definitely try and use non-conventional percussion instrument to perform your rhythm, to perform your.
I think some more that I've came across are Google, radio again, and then few things on tunnel radio, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it. These are the variety.
Very good. Very good. Look, I'll tell you what I want to do with this next record. And you have to promise me not to share this with anybody because it's a state secret or AKDNY secret at the moment. Here's what I want to do. We are going into production. We are going to have a new record. We are going to have music that is tradition-rooted contemporary music. And what I want to have is I want to be able to finally give AKDN ownership of these pieces, because being a producer is never enough. I want to actually give AKDN the power of becoming a music publisher. And with that in mind, we will still have the physical aspect of CDs, because there's still countries that actually have enough of the computers that have the CD possibility. So we will still produce CDs. We will also symbolically produce LPs, just because it's a beautiful object to have. And as I said, it's coming back into vogue with a gigantic, huge force. But most importantly, once we have the opportunity of the music publishing and recognition of our own intellectual property over these musical creations, we will partner with as many legal online distributors as possible. Be it YouTube, be it iTunes, be it Spotify, be it the ASCAPs, be it the collecting agencies worldwide, to ensure not only the most wide availability of this music, but also the best possible distribution that we can afford for it. So I hope that all of you who answered, and thank you for your answers, I hope that in your next search, very, very soon, in the nearest of futures, we'll be able to, you'll be able to find the music that is not only produced by us, but also owned and published by us.
Amazing. And I think your point about LPs have made quite a few people excited. So I can see in the chat box as well. Okay, I think moving on to some of the other questions that have come across so far. And I think if you have other questions, please feel free to put it in the chat box now. So the first question.
One thing I wanted to say, Fahim, sorry about that. Because we are talking about listening to music, I've asked for our latest concert production examples to be shared. And those of you who know Arakan music program, you will know that we've resisted joining the world of digital concerts as long as we could, just because at the start of the COVID era, there was so many bad Zoom online concert creations that, you know, it was only cute for the first 2 weeks. It was funny to see artists in those little square boxes. But by the second week, the sound got so bad, the image got so bad, the listening and viewing experience had none of the attributes of a successful exposure to an artistic performance. So when we finally had hit the wall where resisting digital performing was no longer possible, my own promise to myself and to the team and to the artist was that when we produce a digital concert, it's not going to be of a doubtful quality, and it's going to be different. It's going to be almost a film viewing experience. So any one of you who have an opinion on how that was done, whether that was achieved or not, what could be improved, what could be done differently, I'd be delighted to hear from you as well.
Great. Thank you. And Firoz, as you are on this point, maybe do you want to speak more about the piece that we gave them as a pre-listening, which I assume some of them would have done, especially around that Uyghur piece that you were talking about in our
Well, but
initial
let's see what the participants thought now. How many listened to the piece that I shared through Fahim? And what did you think about it? Did you see that this piece was not contemporary at all, that it was a very traditional, not arranged piece? Did you notice what part of the world it came from? Why was it important for the Arakan master musicians to play that piece in their first digital iteration of the concert? Did you have some thoughts? Fahim, if somebody wants to unmute themselves and talk, I think we could allow that.
Absolutely. If you want to unmute yourself and share your thoughts, feel free to do so. And if you want to put it in the chat box, that's completely all right. I know some of you might have not got a chance to listen to that because we shared it with you almost yesterday evening, but I'm hoping that you would then follow up as a post activity as well.
Fahim, do you want to get the ball rolling? I'm assuming you
Sure.
listened to it. What did you think?
Shahina. Okay.
I think my ear for music isn't so good that I could understand that it wasn't a composed piece. And Fahim and I were talking about it the other day, but how sometimes music can be just for the joy of music, not for an additional purpose. So when I was listening to it, it was that experience that I was having rather than thinking about the origin of the music and how it came about necessarily, and just experiencing it.
That's a terrific answer, because a good piece of music should be able to do just that. It should be able to exist on all different levels. But first and foremost, you're absolutely right. It needs to be a terrific, joyous experience. And what was important in that piece is that you had 6 musicians who were on 3 continents. We had a musician in Tajikistan in Central Asia, 2 musicians who drove to meet each other in just outside of San Diego in Northern California. And then we had 3 artists who flew into Switzerland to be close to the EKDN headquarters in Geneva and to record the music there. So that piece required 3 different layers of filming, 3 different layers of sound recording, and everyone was a metronome listening to the piece. So for example, the Californian group would record during their day, upload it during the night. So the Geneva group and the Tajikistan group would download it in the morning and then put their own headphones and record over their sound. And then there would be another layer of the cleaning up of the sound. So what I'm most happy about as a producer is that you listen to it and you almost believe that they were in the same room, all of them together, even though they were thousands of miles apart. But to me, the hidden important aspect of that music is that you had 6 artists from Hangzhou, from Dushanbe, from Tashkent, from Aleppo, from Tunis, and from Kamishli, which is the Syrian-Turkish border. And what they wanted to do is to pay a tribute to another one of the Aga Khan master musicians who was unable to join them this time for a very specific reason. That artist is an Uyghur artist who lives in China, where Uyghurs are openly persecuted for the simple fact that they are Muslims. They are not only able to express their faith, every single symbolic element of their faith is being either made into some sort of folkloric museum reference or eradicated altogether. So for these 6 artists who are very good musicians, it was just important for them to play a tribute to someone who was not with them on stage, who was not sharing the virtual stage on them, who was being denied a very simple human expression for the mere fact of their faith and ethnicity. And you know that AKDN never expresses political statements. We do not take one side or another. We are non-denomination, we're non-political, but sometimes it takes a simple rendition of a musical performance to make one's position very clear. And I'm delighted that first and foremost, it's a terrific piece. And secondly, that somewhere in the part of the world where that music is not welcome, the rendition of that piece in an international performance that went through Smithsonian, through Hop Dartmouth, through the Arakan Museum, that the rendition of this piece will not only be seen as an expression of beauty, but also as an expression of support.
Thank you. And I think it was wonderful to see how these master musicians navigated these boundaries of the geographies and all the limitations to come together and develop this piece. I think it tells a lot about the music itself, the transcendental nature of music. Firoz, we have a few questions. I think the first question came across was somebody wrote about saying that the upcoming work in collaboration with the AKU ISMC, what that work would entail, what kind of materials do you envision to produce with that kind of collaboration with AKU ISMC?
Very good question. Well, one of the things that I have to be thankful to COVID for is that a lot of the plans that we've had over the last few years, but never seemed to have time to actually make work. Well, a lot of them came through during the slowdown. And one of them is expanded partnerships with AKDN and Jamati institutions. So we're working very closely now with the AKES and the Agricult academies to create curriculums, to create training by the Arakan master musicians. But one of the projects that we've been thinking about for a very long time, and we're finally able to put together at the start of this year, is partnership with IKU ISMC to create joint publication series. And these are the publication series that hopefully will see the light of day before the end of this year. We have partnered with, we didn't know which publishing house to go with. It was very easy for us to decide on the contents of the series. So these are the series that will celebrate music and artistic expressions throughout the world of the Great East, throughout the world in which Islam and Muslims have significant presence. And they're not limited to one style or genre or particular geography. It's really like the music awards. They will celebrate Eastern excellence. But we agreed that ISMC London team will be responsible for commissioning a certain group of authors, and so will the Arakan music program. And then there is a joint vetting process. And we then couldn't really decide for a long time who is the publisher, who is going to be our publisher of these books. Because as you know, the traditional book publishing is no longer something that is of value, because unless there is a giant electronic content, and unless there is an online access for the contents of the book, this is not something that we wanted to go with. And the second really important element was access to the critical mass of readers. And to us, that always meant a university press, any university press. So we had a very successful partnership with the Indiana University Press when we published the music textbook. We considered seriously going with Columbia University Press, but unfortunately they didn't have as much of an open mind as we hoped they would. So in the end, our wonderful partner, who's about to be announced in another press release, is the Edinburgh University Press. And it is Edinburgh University Press who will put out the first 2 books in these series, and they will be a completely sort of opposite end of the spectrum when you think about the music in the East, because one of the books will concentrate 100% on pop music and rise of good quality pop music in the East, and the other one will look at the most what's the word? It's the most attractive and the most mystifying tradition that a lot of those living in the West are attracted to when thinking about the music in the East, and that is the tradition of the whirling dervishes. So we will have 2 books come out before. Well, it's not going to be before the end of this year. It will be in 2021, but one will celebrate pop music and one will celebrate the tradition of the whirling dervishes.
Thank you, Feroz. I think the second question that has come across is more around the access piece. So I think in events like Arakan Music Initiative concerts or even the awards, is there a way for Jamati members to support that kind of initiative or even access that? And on the similar line, the second piece is that a number of the work that your team have produced in terms of the textbooks and also the CDs and the audios haven't reached to some parts of the Jamaat. So are there any initiatives that are being in place to get them to that side, or do you have any thoughts about that kind of access piece?
Thank you very much for the questions. If anyone personally cannot get access to the piece of music that we produced and you can't get it, just write to us, let us know, and we'll make sure that we get that to you. Second is, this is why I talked about the importance of music publishing. And let me just make it clear that music publishing and book publishing have nothing in common. Book publishing is a physical process. Music publishing is something that gives us intellectual property ownership over a piece. So once we are able to do that, and we are just about to create a music publishing company that will be under our own name, once we have that, then this is where we can really create partnerships with every single distributor worldwide. Because if we were to go to any distributor now, be it iTunes or Spotify or anyone else, they would say, well, you're not the ones we're partnering as. We have to go to the Smithsonian, we have to go to the Folk Quiz, we have to go to the theater who presented your music, because you're not the owners, you're not the publishers, you're just the producers. Who cares who commissioned this kind of music? So once we have the music publishing rights, then this is when this music really will become much, much, much wider available. But in the meantime, a lot of it is on YouTube. A lot of it is pirated on YouTube. A lot of it is on Vimeo and Spotify, and everything that we did produce is available legally through iTunes and Spotify. But if you still can't get access, just let me know, and we'll make sure that you have access to that. Don't hesitate to go to our Vimeo channel, Agakan Music program on Vimeo, and Agakan Music on iTunes. I'll share one more time the slide with all of our handles on iTunes, on YouTube, on Vimeo, and also on social media. We have a lot of music that is constantly updated over there. So make sure you go there as well. Make sure you visit regularly the new Agakan Music program page on akdn.org. It will, parts of it will only go live next week on Monday, as of tomorrow. So make sure you visit that regularly. Just stay in touch with us. There's a lot of stuff that we write about and talk about. To go back to the original question about access, now, all of these ceremonies that we are part of, be it the music awards, be it the opening night, a lot of the concerts, they are most often webcast. And I know that because music program, thank goodness, is very loved by the Jamaat worldwide, large events such as the music awards, for example, they were hosted live through a live webcast in the Smiley centers, at least in the larger ones in Lisbon and London, where the time difference also allows for the live webcast. So there's a lot of webcasts happening. And again, we are developing so much potential for the online music production in these last few months that I think it's only going to increase. What I pledge to do is, when there is a new event, we will make sure that we post the announcement that you're able to join it through either a Zoom link or a webcast link or another kind of web link. As much music as we can, we make it available to the online viewing.
Thank you, Feroz. I think the next question is around the performing arts in relation to dance, and we have talked about music. Is there similar collaborations and focus area happening in terms of dance and the traditional dance forms as well? And if you can shed some light on that, please.
This is a wonderful, wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. There's several layers of answer. So in many of the Eastern tradition, music and dance are not separated. It's a single expression very often. But just as with traditional music education, traditional dance education has suffered greatly in many countries, in many cultures. And that is the one where at the very beginning we had to choose what to go with. So we had to go either with the vitalization of the method itself, contemporization of the master apprentice Ustad Shagird method, and unfortunately at the very beginning that those two had to become priorities. We couldn't add dance to that because it simply would have meant finding teachers that we no longer had, finding resources that we no longer had. So some of the musical traditions that we work with cannot be imagined without an expression of a dance, and then that of course does the training. What I hope to do going forward is to merge the expressions of the music and artists with the contemporary dance expression that come from that culture or anywhere around the world. And those of you who followed the creation of the Music Awards, you will know that to me personally, and thank goodness the board agreed with me, it was very, very important to have a multidisciplinary jury. So the master jury of the Arakan Music Awards, again, those of you who watched the film will know, it's not a group of ethnomusicologists. We have an extraordinary curator and art developer. We have a classical musician and violinist who is at the forefront of one of the most famous quartets in the classical music in the West. We have a very good musical scholars. We have ethnomusicologists, but we also have, those of you living in London, you will be familiar with the force of nature and the force of dance that is Akram Khan. So Akram Khan, an extraordinary dancer, a hero in the world of contemporary dance, is also the member of the inaugural master jury of the Aga Khan Music Awards. And I'll tell you a secret, don't share it. We very much hope that he will remain on the master jury for the next cycle of the Aga Khan Music Awards. So that, of course, will prompt new creations for which dance will be an integral element. Are we prepared to teach dance in our music schools? Right now, no. Simply because it demands the skills of the teachers that we do not have at the moment. Do I exclude it for the future? Of course not. And a lot of the graduates of our schools who go into the world of independent performance, a lot of them somehow make collaborations that include a dance element.
Thank you. The next question is quite exciting in multiple ways, at least. So two people have asked on similar lines that, as you know, that Bollywood is another area where dance and music production is happening, mostly for commercial purposes as well. Do you think any kind of collaboration or fusion, because we took one example of fusion last time. So are there any possibilities of fusion with the Central Asian music with the subcontinent piece, either through Bollywood kind or a separate classical or semi-classical Indian piece? So that was one piece that came around. And maybe on the similar lines, talking about maybe having some of your thoughts about the fusion that is happening in platforms like Coke Studios in some parts of the world, especially Pakistan and India, where there's some kind of fusion happening. So if you have any thoughts about that.
Subcontinent and Central Asia, we tried. A lot of it happened in live concerts. But what I've learned is that for a successful fusion piece to happen, there needs to be a composer arranger that looks at that piece. Those of you who would look into the opening ceremony of the Agricult Music Awards, for example, in Lisbon, what we had was, for the first time, we partnered with the full symphony orchestra and created pieces that were performed Eastern pieces, Eastern contemporary pieces that were performed by a full symphony orchestra. And that took exactly 1 year to create. It meant not only having the full commitment and cooperation of the orchestra and the composers on our side, it also meant that we had to have a very talented arranger and orchestrator. And it would be exactly the same thing if we were to partner with musicians on the subcontinent. You know, remember when I said that the good fusion doesn't happen on its own? You can't just take a Central Asian musician and a subcontinent musician, just put them in the room together and hope that something will come out of it. Of course, something will come out of it. They'll have a beautiful jam session, but it's not going to be a finished piece of music that can be presented on an international stage. For that, you have to have a professional arranger that looks into the creation of the piece. We did a little bit of that when we, the volume number 9 in the Music of Central Asia anthology was called In the Footsteps of the Mughals, in the footsteps of Babur, in the footsteps of Babur rather. And the subtitle was Musical Encounters in the Lands of the Mughals. So what we did is we've taken a wonderful santoor player from India, Rahul Sharma, who is a very well-known Bollywood musician. And we partnered them with Salar Nader on the tabla, Humayun Sahi on the Afghan rubab, and 2 of the Central Asian artists from Barakshan, Ismaili Barakshan and Dushanbe. And it's a brilliant quartet creation that again required almost a year of work for those pieces to be created. Those of you who are interested, I'll send you a short film about that. Would we go back and do it again? Absolutely. It just requires time and commitment. But that first example of it was quite terrific.
Thank you, Feroz. I think one more question that has come across, possibly the last one, is you briefly mentioned about the role of government, the national government, when you were working with one of the countries, and I think the question was around: what kind of other challenges that you or the music program has faced when working with different countries? I think the tilt of the question is towards this idea that has AKDN been seen as an outsider coming in to do something, or how does that kind of negotiation at the national level has come across, considering this is part of the deep part of the tradition? And so I think that around those lines.
You know, so far at least, being seen as an outsider has not been a problem. What has been a problem is that I think a lot of the national governments, and this goes mostly for post-Soviet Central Asia, on the subcontinent and in the Middle East and in North Africa, there is a very large percentage of presence and respect from the government, and at least an understanding that music and musical art is something that needs to be supported. And to be honest, there's also no shortage of those who are willing to support it, either from the government itself or international foundations that have specific pockets of budget pockets for that. What happened in the post-Soviet Central Asia, and also to a certain extent in Afghanistan, is that the governments were not considering us outsiders. They were more than happy to hand it over to us, the role of sort of Ministry of Culture almost, you know, in terms of the funder, in terms of the organizer, in terms of the sort of provider of stability of some sort. And that is a very dangerous approach, because there are, if you think about the music in the East, if you think about the Eastern, the art of musical expression, and that's not limited to the East, but it's particularly true historically for the East, is that this kind of music, you know, if you think about the Ilim al-Musiki, the art music in Baghdad in Iraq, or the music in Aleppo, or the ones that were created in the Mughal courts, the most beautiful, the most valuable artistic creation were always created under the patronage of the local ruler. It's not something that just happens spontaneously because there were always good musicians. No, a ruler had to not only think about developing this, they also very often had to commission it. They commissioned the artists to create a piece that was performed in the palace court. One of my ancestors, Firuz Khan, who was the one before last ruler of Khorasan in Uzbekistan, modern day Uzbekistan, he made it a rule in his court that no man was allowed to become a courtier unless he knew how to compose music or write poetry. So it was always at the back of the mind of the best of the rulers that the art and musical expression required help, required patronage. So when the rulers disappeared and governments and ministries of culture and local structures come to take their place, if they fall apart for budgetary reasons or for any kind of reasons, it's not enough to just welcome an international funder from the outside, because no matter how generous AKGN is with its commitment, with its presence, and with its time, our goal as international development agency is to ultimately leave. We are not there to stay. We're not the local government. We're not the Ministry of Culture. We have to be able to depart. So if the local Ministry of Culture is not fully present, is not fully cognizant of our role, but also their role, then we're in trouble. Then we have to work with the civil society. Then we have to strengthen the civil society. And that's why none of the schools that we have, none of the music schools that we've created, none of them are called Agakan School for Music in Dushanbe or anything else. They are all created as local independent NGOs. And of course, everybody knows that they're our schools, but they're local independent NGOs. What does this allow them to do? This allows them to use us as their support foundation, but they also go and fundraise on their own. So right now, our schools in Central Asia are supported by the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Our school in Afghanistan and in Kabul and Herat are supported by the US government. Our school in Kabul, in Cairo and Aswan are supported by the Swiss Development Office and the Swiss Foreign Ministry. So you see, the fact that we are not governmental structure and we do not insist that schools bear our names, allow them to go to the independent funders. And independent funders simultaneously know that, yes, we are there. We are the guarantee of the school's solidity. But at the same time, we do not have any ownership over them. And ultimately, what does this do? This frees up imamate funding, so that we can give them to others in other countries that are not yet benefiting from our support and presence.
Makes sense. Thank you so much. Thank you, Feroz. I think the last one, I said the previous question is last, but I would just make this last one. And it's quite witty to ask. One of the participants has asked, Feroz, how do you listen to music? Not just in terms of the medium itself, but also what do you do when you listen to music? Because sometimes we are trained in reading, we are trained in writing at school, but sometimes we are not trained in listening. So as a common person in that way, how do you even suggest us to listen to music?
Well, I'm lucky because I get to listen to it live. And this is honestly the biggest gift that you can give yourselves, to listen to live music, to melt into it, to let the performance take over you. You know, it's a dichotomy of our work that we do so much to spread the word about this music, to popularize it, to make sure that you can buy it online, you can see it online. But at the same time, we all know, any music producer will tell you that the ultimate viewing experience is the intimacy and beauty of the live performance. So I listen to it live as much as I can. I listen to as much live music as I could possibly afford, be it whenever I travel. That was pretty much part of my everyday. Since COVID, I listen to a lot of music on Zoom. I listen to it whenever I have a free moment, not just because it's my work. I listen to as many genres as I can possibly imagine, because as I told you, I think last time, there's no such thing as to me at least, is, you know, I don't make the division between classical music of the East, classical music of the West, pop, rap, world music, jazz. There's good music and there's bad music, and I listen to that. I listen to good music. I hear sometimes examples of badly put together music that is, you know, bad music doesn't mean bad musicians, but very often very good musicians do not give themselves trouble to create good music, and I try as much as possible to avoid that. But yeah, if there's one thing I can encourage you to do, is listen to live music. It transforms you. It transforms your existence. It goes back to the definition of the music that we Easterners have always had. It's not an entertainment. It's part of your everyday life. It can heal you. It can clean you. It can elevate you. It can change your mood. And ultimately, it will always enrich you if you let it.
Thank you, Feroz. I think these are such wonderful, powerful, and inspirational words to bring this to close. I don't think I have any better words to conclude this piece, but thank you so much, Feroz, for taking us through both the parts. And I think the amount of thoughts and inspiration and the avenues to explore this program and even music beyond the program that you have invited our participants is outstanding. And we really appreciate, and we present our gratitude for this extraordinary experience that you have embarked us for now 2 episodes in that way. So thank you on behalf of the Heritage team and on behalf of all the participants and ITRAB UK for devoting your time despite of many, many things happening in your life during this month as well. So thank you. We really appreciate and acknowledge that.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you for listening, for being with us, and look out for us. Google Agakan Music Program. Listen to the new pieces of music that we produce. When we come to your town and post-COVID world, come to the concerts, come to the jam sessions. Just stay in touch. This is what will keep us alive.
Thank you. Thank you so much. In the chat box, I have put the Arakan Music Program Vimeo link as well. And if you now would like to go back to this email where we shared 5 or 6 links with you, that has some short films that were shared by Feroz and some of the musical performances as well. I think after that session, when you go back to those links, I hope it would bring a lot of things that we discussed just in this session alive. So I encourage you to go back to those links. If you have any feedback or suggestions, we have put an email address in the chat box, which is yzine@iiuk.org. If you have any feedback, suggestions, or thoughts for our next talk, please write back to us, or even if you have any feedback for today's talk, we will be happy to take it on board. We have shared some of the links in the chat box that I hope would be helpful for you. And we will share the recording of both the episodes, hopefully somewhere down mid of December or so. So look forward to that. We will take a break in the month of December for Heritage Series, and we will come back to you in January with our plan for next year and how each of the sessions would look like. So just wait and stay with us for that. Thank you once again, all of you, for joining this afternoon and this session today. We really, this gift of time is irreplaceable. I think all those gifts might be replaceable, but the gift of time is irreplaceable. And thank you for giving us your gift of time. Take care and have a wonderful rest of the evening. Thank you once again, Feroz.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.